Do you remember the first words out of Demise's mouth when he sees Link? He says,
"So, boy, you are the goddess's knight then."
He then looks up at Zelda and back at Link before making another remark.
Intriguing. How pathetic.
Implying that Hylia was way more magnificent than what Zelda looks like. Demise speaks as if he's already aware that Hylia would have a knight. What do you think this means? Demise's question has piqued my curiosity for quite some time now. I want you to remember these words for later. In the last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time discussing theories with other friends in the community, as well as with all of my friends in the comments. There were some great ideas that a lot of you brought up, and we spent time discussing those ideas. I can definitely say that it's been exciting to hear your thoughts, hear you out, and reflect on those thoughts as we near the release of Tears of the Kingdom. In a collaboration that I'll be doing with Gamesmiths, coming soon, we were talking about the Zelda lore and the theories in the community, and how we piece that all together cohesively to make sense of it all. The short answer is that we can't. There's too much to cover and so little time to do it. GS and myself both share a passion for the mystery of Zelda games. He was kind enough to share some observations that he had that I think were pretty cool. There's a ton of Easter eggs, references, and connections throughout the Zelda world that are easy to miss and can be understood differently depending on how you look at them. GS showed me a few things that he's noticed, and a few of those observations is what will be discussed in this video, as well as how I interpret his observations. The takeaway I got from what Gamesmiths pointed out is that details are easy to miss when applying a surface level approach to every detail that appears in front of you. GS pointed out things that I had never paid attention to before. Specifically, he pointed out two things that I will notate in this video. We will elaborate further on those ideas once our collaboration happens. If this is your first time seeing my channel, hello and welcome. I'm Wiz. Taking the correct actions at the correct times is what some people would describe as clutch. I call this catching lightning. Like the Link you see in most Zelda games, I'm left-handed, and my favorite color is green. This quality, not my affinity for green, boils down to an ability to engage in more right-brain creative thinking. I have a penchant for seeing patterns in things that I believe are worth noting, and this inspires me to share my observations with you in the form of storytelling. Let's start with a phrase I said in my first video that kicked off my other videos regarding Tears of the Kingdom. Super relevant if you haven't already seen it, by the way. That phrase is the following: history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure likes to rhyme. There are many ways that the Zelda series as a whole embodies this phrase. For the sake of time and the opportunity to make follow-up content, I don't want to outright say things. Instead, I would like to introduce some curious ideas to you and allow you to form your own conclusions. So think of this video as a sort of guide to certain things to pay attention to while you play Tears of the Kingdom. Now, it's important to mention that the Zelda series involves solving puzzles with its gameplay, so it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to infer that the Zelda series also likes to make its lore a puzzle for people to collaboratively theorize about as well. Think about those Zelda forums of old, before the series started getting popular. At the end of this video, you'll find that Nintendo frequently likes to drop little hints at where the series is going and what we, the players, will be seeing in Tears of the Kingdom. Take the official yet vague statement made by Aonuma when he said that Breath of the Wild was at the end of the timeline, for example. When the Zelda series started taking on a retroactively connected chronology with the advent of A Link to the Past, so did whispers about a Zelda timeline. This eventually led to a timeline theory, which then led to the official Zelda timeline that we have today. We can see an allusion to the three timelines that originated in Ocarina of Time with the ending of Skyward Sword, the Zelda game that takes place at the beginning of the overarching timeline. Look at this scene here. What do you see? Obviously, you see the Master Sword, but what's beyond that? As the Master Sword is laid to rest, we can see that right behind it, there are 3 double helix vines growing up into the ceiling of the Sealed Grounds Temple. This wasn't a mistake. This is acknowledgement that before the 3 timelines were created, there was one central timeline. This potentially acknowledges a convergence at some point in all 3 timelines, at the end of the timeline, where Breath of the Wild is placed. Either that, or we will see tears of the kingdom, timelines converging within microchasms somehow in this next game. Considering that the Master Sword is broken, and that it's the literal time key of the Zelda series, this isn't difficult to imagine. We can also see this continued allusion to the 3 timelines in the latest official imagery for Tears of the Kingdom. This image here shows all 3 timelines of the previous games, from Ocarina of Time onward. We see the double helices on the right and the left, with the hilt of the broken Master Sword representing the 3rd double helix. The 3 timelines are going to be better revealed in Tears of the Kingdom at some capacity, and if we don't get an explanation, we will, at the very least, have a better understanding of how all 3 timelines could have converged. This becomes even more apparent when we see this scene in the final trailer for Tears of the Kingdom. It's brief, and it cuts to another scene just before the viewer is shown what is opening up in front of Zelda here. What's behind that gate? Pay attention to the color. It looks like something we've seen before, the Gate of Time from Skyward Sword. When you take this image here, and you flip it upside down, and then transpose it against the scene I've described, it lines up perfectly. There's no mistaking the architectural precision. I think Zelda is standing in front of the Gate of Time, which would mean that she is at the Temple of Time in the ancient past, or someplace like it. This makes the Zonai mural image of a Zelda figure engaging hands with a Zonai figure all the more transparent, especially when this image complements the image of a Zonai figure descending with 7 tears from what looks like a sunny place. As I've mentioned before, I believe Hylia was a dragon goddess, as she is the symbolic Amaterasu of the Zelda franchise. Amaterasu was the sun goddess of Japanese folklore. Her realm was light. Hylia was the goddess of both light and time. We see this direct relationship with the Temple of Time, which was a gateway to the Temple of Light, as well as the Sacred Realm in Ocarina of Time. Rinkudo, man, I can't get this guy out of my head, twit-longered about the tears in depth. Link in description. He tweeted about the tears being ancient artifacts that represent all of light. When light is concentrated, it makes a solid white beam. What happens when you shine a light through a prism? That light splits into the Roiji Biv of the colors that the human eye can see, also known as the visible spectrum of light. These are the differently colored tears that we see in the final Tears of the Kingdom trailer, with each tear color representing a color of the rainbow. So if Zelda is transported back in time, and we know that she is the avatar of a goddess who is associated with light and time, then we have an answer for what the 2 tears are in this picture. They are the tears of both light and time, which makes this Zonai figure, who is possibly Richard, the Sage of Light. Because, again, it's shown that Zelda has the Recall Tear, and the Recall Tear controls time. This gets even more interesting. I'm going to show you 2 specific scenes from the final trailer. The first one is Richard being shown very briefly here. The second scene is Link right here with warriors behind him. The scene with Buckethead, the guy everyone loves. These 2 scenes depict the exact same dynamic. You can make out faint images of warriors holding the Magatama tears in this scene with Richard at the helm, leading these champions, and you can see Link in a similar situation surrounded by warriors in this scene. Both individuals are rallying and leading troops. Why do you think this is the case? I'm of the belief that the 2 scenes parallel each other. Richard could be the chosen knight that Demise referred to back in Skyward Sword, the goddess's chosen knight. It's always puzzled me that Zelda and Ganondorf would have deities who represent their godliness, but not Link. And yet, Demise knows what Link is without ever meeting him. 2 events in Skyward Sword help give this idea life. When Link passes his exam to become a Sky Knight, Zelda gives him the sailcloth item. I've said this before in a previous video, but when Fi is first introduced, she comments on the idea of the legend of Hylia that Gaipora had passed down to him. Specifically, she states that this legend was passed down through oral tradition, which is the least reliable method of maintaining a consistent thread to what actually happened. That's quite an exposition. This sailcloth ritual is a reenactment of the goddess giving a flying device to her chosen hero. Of course, it's not the same sailcloth of legend, but that's what the ritual symbolizes. The second scene is where we see mention of the chosen hero of the goddess, is when Zelda imbues the Master Sword with its holy power, finally activating the blade as the Bane of Evil. When Zelda realizes that she is the reincarnated Hylia and regains her memories, she later admits that she knew Link would follow her and that he would try to save her as well. How would she know that? She has memories of a chosen hero from a previous life. Another interesting thing that I want to point out is that there was a battle between good and evil before the events of Skyward Sword. This decisive battle is mentioned at the beginning of Skyward Sword, during the prologue. This war leads to the creation of the Master Sword and the reincarnation of Hylia as Zelda. It ended in a stalemate of sorts, with Demise being sealed away by Hylia. If that doesn't sound like a familiar Zelda archetype to you, well then let's push it even further. During Skyward Sword, Demise has a knack for returning from his confinement. It's not a full return, however, because he returns as the Imprisoned, a magically sealed form that can't return without consuming the soul of Hylia. I'm giving you the only clue you need right now, but I'll happily elaborate. Thought experiment time. Let's assume that there is a chosen knight of Hylia who, dare I say, loved Hylia. Let's assume that during the final battle, which Fi mentions in the prologue of Skyward Sword, this chosen knight is gravely injured. This chosen knight either dies or becomes seriously incapacitated. Let's assume that as a result of the chosen hero falling in battle against Demise, Hylia and the individuals who are an extension of her power split into 7, also known as sages, attempt to seal Demise away. They succeed at their objective, but the seal is not permanent because the evil entity is able to return again and again. This sealing takes place because of the downfall of the goddess's hero. If you were to give this event a name, what would you call this epic battle? I'd call it, are you ready for this? The Imprisoning War. Alright, so here's the coup de grace to everything I've mentioned. If I were an orchestra conductor, this would be the ensemble. Here it is. The picture that summarizes everything you need to know. This is the cover of the Zelda Encyclopedia. This book was first released adjacent to Breath of the Wild, and its cover never really made sense to me when I first saw it, and rightfully so. This cover has a lot of information that can be overlooked to the whiz of 2017. A lot of people want to try and discredit this book for discrepancies while conveniently forgetting that it gets a lot right. If you want to enlighten me on what some of those mistakes were, please feel free to leave a comment, so that I have a better understanding on just how exactly this book royally screwed the pooch. Here's what we know. The team who published this book had access to all of Nintendo's Zelda documents. Nintendo had to sign off on what they could publish before it was published. We should make special mention of pages describing timeline placements, as well as where the Triforce is in each timeline of the Zelda series, because those will probably be important in Tears of the Kingdom. And those pages were printed with amazing accuracy. I would love to discuss the page that covers the illusory and parallel worlds seen here, but that is going to take more time than I can imagine. And if you think you can figure out what exactly this page means, and what it's showing us, look again. I thought I knew, and I was graciously humbled for my hubris. My best advice would be to try and draw it out three-dimensionally as best as you can. You'll spend days trying to rack your brain around it all. Back to the cover. This is a thing of beauty. Let's start with Zelda. Zelda's border is a sun and moon pattern. Zelda represents the sun goddess Amaterasu, so that covers the sun or light symbology. At the corner of her borders is what looks like the Hylian royal crest. But I actually think that this is the symbol for the Master Sword, because this image looks oddly familiar to the image of Fi when she reaches out to the hero of the skies in his dreams. And this would make sense, because Hylia was Fi's master. Hylia was technically the original master of this weapon, until that blade was passed on to Link, Fi's new master. Fi was forged as the Blade of the Goddess, before her divinity was sacrificed to be able to wield the Triforce. As alluded to in the final trailer, reforging the Master Sword would technically be something only Zelda was capable of doing. So I think this is what she'll be doing. Now, the Sun Goddess had a counterpart, the Moon Deity, Tsukuyomi. We're gonna forget about Tsukuyomi. Instead, I want you to focus on the embodiment of rancor, greed, hatred, any toxic comment you've seen in your videos that you put a lot of thought into. Basically everything involving resentment. That cosmic individual would be Mikaboshi. Mikaboshi was known as the Primal Chaos, an evil entity that was born out of all rancor, hatred, and desire for revenge of the goddess Izanami, the wife of Izanagi, the god that gave birth to Amaterasu, Susanoo, and several other gods. Mikaboshi isn't really recognized as one of the gods. Instead, Mikaboshi is recognized as a force. The true appearance of Mikaboshi is largely unknown. He's a being that's always perceived as a kind of dark liquid that expands indefinitely throughout creation. Some people even say it looks like oil. Mikaboshi usually manifests as a humanoid figure made of thick smoke with red eyes, or as a thin gray hair protruding entity with sharp teeth and giant claws attached to his fingers. Mikaboshi is an elusive force of nature, with its true form being that of an immense formless darkness that exists solely because of the hatred of other living creatures. Alright, now look at Ganondorf's borders on the cover. He has the classic Gerudo pattern. What's that in the corner of his border? Kind of looks like a dreadstone. Yup, Demise is coming back somehow. Most people say it won't happen. I don't know if those people have been playing the same Zelda games as me, but I have reasoned several theorems as to how this could happen. That image on Ganondorf's borders is the scar of the deity who is represented by the avatar of Ganondorf. This just leaves Link. What is Link's role in all of the Zelda games? Well, Link acts as a sort of balance between good and evil. He's the character who most frequently changes the course of fate by being able to acquire and wish upon the Triforce. I'm not entirely sure how his borders fully represent this fact, but I do know that if you take the Triforce of Courage out of the Triforce, it becomes lopsided and it falls over. What I also know is that we've seen his corner image before. I've seen it twice now. GameSmiths helped me make this connection. The image of the triangle within the triangle. You can see it right here on the Gate of Time. And you can also see it on the mantle that belongs to Richard in this scene here. When we have images associated with the cosmic beings, for both Zelda and Ganondorf, on their image borders of the cover of the Zelda Encyclopedia, I think it's safe to assume that Link's deity is also being represented on this cover. Of course, like any theory, this entire theory could be wrong, and I'm willing to accept that. The triangle within the triangle is only one of 12 images on the Gate of Time after all. Where can we find the other images seen on the Gate of Time? I've definitely seen the hourglass image before. I specifically remember seeing it on Zelda's cloak in Twilight Princess. I'm curious to hear what you think. Have you seen any of these other Gate of Time images before? If so, which image and where did you find it? And what do you think about this idea? Please, leave a comment. I want to hear what you have to say. Try force some clicks on those like and subscribe buttons if you want to help spread the word or see more content. And thanks for watching. It means a lot. I'm Wiz. I'm gonna go catch some lightning. I hope you all have a great time playing Tears of the Kingdom, and I will hopefully see all of you soon. And take care out there. It's dangerous to go alone after all.